Now on Canton Confidential.
I'm declaring a mistrial in this case.
Weeks after the gavel came down, the fallout continues to rise. State troopers disciplined.
I think it certainly raises a red flag as to whether or not his investigations are done without bias.
New lawsuits filed. Jurors break their silence. And now, a new prosecutor takes the helm.
We, the people and taxpayers, demand transparency and answers.
With John O'Keefe's family still waiting for a verdict, Karen Reed prepares to once again defend herself in court.
Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed!
We get you caught up right now on a special edition of Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
It's been 3 months since a mistrial was declared, and we have a lot of new developments to discuss. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Canton Confidential. I'm JC Monahan.
And I'm Corey Smith. So good to be with you, and it's good to have our legal analysts back with us to guide us through everything that has happened.
But before we unpack the recent fallout, we have to go back to the night that changed so many lives.
January 28th, 2022.
To the fullest extent possible, stay off the roads.
With a blizzard in the forecast, Karen Reed and her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, were enjoying a night out before the snow fell. They started the night at C.F. McCarthy's in Canton before going to the nearby Waterfall Bar, where they met up with friends, some of whom are in law enforcement. When closing time came, the group decided to keep going, back at the home of fellow Boston police officer Brian Albert and his wife Nicole. Hours later, it would be outside that home at 34 Fairview Road where John O'Keefe's body would be found.
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow.
Prosecutors say Reed hit O'Keefe with her SUV and left him to die in the snow. Her attorneys say she's being framed. And the jury? After hearing from 74 witnesses and seeing more than 650 exhibits entered as evidence, remain deeply divided.
The Commonwealth has charged Reed with second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene of a crash causing death. She is still facing those charges, despite a motion by her attorneys to have 2 of them thrown out.
That motion was denied by Judge Beverly Cannoni, but now the Commonwealth's highest court has agreed to hear Reed's appeal. That's just one of the major developments in the wake of the mistrial that happened in July.
It has been 3 months full of new twists and turns. You may have missed a few headlines, so here's a quick recap to get you caught up. Comes after a mistrial was declared.
Reed's legal team is asking the state's highest court to throw out 2 of the charges against her.
The state's highest court will hear Karen Reed's appeal.
A new prosecutor is leading the case against Karen Reed in her second murder trial.
It will call into question his credibility.
Named in a wrongful death lawsuit by O'Keefe's family members.
They are both related to the Karen Reed trial.
This is the Karen Reed movement.
You know, be careful what you wish for. Sometimes the answer is no.
We'll do it next time.
Well, welcome back to the table. Who do we have? NBC Boston legal analyst Michael Coyne and Catherine Loftus, who remind me of the YouTube channel that you have.
TikTok, YouTube, all social media, a little bit of everything, JC. Note my objection.
Note my objection. Thank you very much. See, 3 months off, and the brain has so much, and there is so much to talk about. Not just that Karen Reed is facing the criminal charges again, but that there is a civil suit also that's been filed, and it's been filed against her before we have a verdict, and that seems unusual. So, Michael, will you start?
Yeah,
How
sure.
unusual is it for the O'Keefe family to file that civil lawsuit before we know whether or not criminally she's convicted?
It is unusual because normally the criminal case would proceed very quickly to trial, and so the civil case would be well behind that as a general matter. But you do have occasions, and it's certainly here where we've had a mistrial in the criminal case, where the civil suit and the criminal suit will proceed almost on a parallel tracks.
So we heard from Reed's attorneys that her Fifth Amendment rights could be an issue if the civil trial if the civil case went to trial before the criminal case. Why?
Well, it's an interesting because ultimately she's going to be subject to any deposition in a civil proceeding. And what her attorneys are concerned about is that if she were to undergo a deposition prior to her criminal trial, anything she says obviously can and will be used against her. What they want to do is prevent that, essentially, kick the civil litigation until after the criminal trial is over to essentially protect that. What I think the plaintiff's attorneys were arguing in their opposition is that she has had the opportunity and has taken that opportunity to talk to a number of media outlets. So, you know, it's a little bit of pick and choose, but ultimately any defendant has the right not to testify against themselves. So.
But what most people don't understand about the Fifth Amendment is, yes, she can still claim it in the civil suit because it potentially exposes her to criminal responsibility in the other case. But in a civil suit in Massachusetts, if in fact you choose to exercise the Fifth Amendment, there's a presumption that the answer would be harmful, and the jury can be told, in the civil suit, the jury can be told that she's exercised the Fifth Amendment against testifying.
And that's the huge difference. And we know the bar is so much lower in a civil lawsuit, but that's the big difference, is that
absolutely
they would use that against her, whereas you can't in the criminal case.
Does it matter? So let's say the civil case happens after the second criminal trial. Does it matter if she's convicted or acquitted?
Yes.
What happens in the civil case?
Significantly, because if she's convicted in the criminal case, they will then try to use that through a legal principle called collateral estoppel. The issue has been decided. You were responsible for his death. Now let's just determine what the damages are. And so, yes, it will significantly change it.
Well, during the trial, we know Trooper Michael Proctor's behavior, some of his testimony, the investigation came under scrutiny. So if you need to refresh your memory, I think we all do, hear a few clips from his testimony.
She's a whack job. I text my wife waiting to lock this whack job up. Yes, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though.
Sir, this is a citizen. She's a woman. You were supposed to be objectively investigating. You weren't so much as objectively investigating her as objectifying her in those moments, correct?
Again, Mr. Jackson, it was a poor choice of words and a joke.
That comment was made frequently as a result of what was revealed in Proctor's testimony. He has been suspended without pay. And then just this week, in a separate murder case, their lawyers have requested more information about the investigation that he did on that case. In other words, there's more domino effect and fallout from that one testimony from that one trooper. Will we expect to hear or see more?
Yes, you will see more. There's already other lawyers who are trying to defend their clients, and Proctor was involved in those investigations, and they want access to that material. They want to get an examination of his phone. There's no reason why they won't seek access to it, because at the end of the day, at best, it might be enough to help create reasonable doubt. So it's far from over.
Does the defense attorney see that and just pounce on it, knowing that it could impact their case?
Yes, any defense attorney who has a homicide case that involves any of these troopers, which, to be quite frank, as we have seen, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, their unit, the State Police Unit, CPAC, inside, handles all the homicides. So it's actually a small, this handful of troopers deal with all of these homicides. Any other attorney who has a case other than Karen Reed and has one of these officers involved, particularly like Michael Proctor, sees this as a window of opportunity to essentially attempt to establish reasonable doubt or find something that could benefit their case.
He's not the only one in hot water here. We know Yuri Buchanan, Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert, also disciplined as a result of Proctor's testimony. Is there anybody else that needs to be maybe looking over their shoulders to say, I may be in trouble because of how I acted during this investigation?
I think they all have to be looking over their shoulders. Law enforcement did not cover themselves in glory on this, from the standpoint of evidence collection to evidence preservation. If you think about almost all of the mistakes we heard of throughout the first trial.
Inversed videos, red Solo cups.
Exactly. Anyone who touched some of that evidence should be concerned as to the level of professionalism that should have been displayed and what was actually displayed.
Wow.
All right, you two don't go anywhere, okay? Michael and Catherine are going to stick around, and then a little later on King Confidential, our Sue O'Connell joins the conversation.
But first, who is the high-profile prosecutor taking over this case? We're going to introduce you to Hank Brennan when we come back. Welcome back to Canton Confidential. Now, barring any major developments, a second criminal trial of Karen Reed is less than 4 months away. And one of the biggest changes this time around is the appointment of a new prosecutor, Hank Brennan. He is well known, probably most famous for defending Whitey Bulger. What were your thoughts when you hear that he's going to take over the prosecution of this case?
I thought it was a bold and necessary move. I think Hank Brennan is a terrific lawyer. I think a fresh set of eyes on the case made a lot of sense. And I think the case will be tried a lot more simply than as it should have been the first time around. You know, I watched the Whitey Bulger trial when we covered it. Because federal courts require no cameras in the courtroom, so we actually had to be there. A lot of great lawyers in that room. Hank was the best lawyer in that courtroom throughout that trial. So, and no slight to all the other great lawyers in that room.
But he was that good.
He was very good.
And everyone had their eyes on that trial.
And they did, and it will be warmly received by the jury, and I think to a greater extent, perhaps, than Jackson, simply because his style is more consistent with what we would normally see around here. He's sort of an everyman approach. I would expect that the jury will warm to quite a bit.
Less L.A.
Less L.A. That's right, Casey.
NBC 10 Boston, we got a hold of his contract, and we found out he's making roughly $250 an hour. But here's the thing. He can work as many hours as he wants. The ceiling gets capped at $75,000. And I think when with a record like that, experience like that, $75,000 struck us as a little bit low. So does that seem on track? And the other thing is, does the cap sort of tell you that they don't expect either a lot of work or a lot of time?
I think that it is a little bit on the low end from my perspective, but I mean, it's still $250 an hour. If you equal it out, it's probably about 300 hours or so. And as you said, it's capped at $75,000. What that indicates to me is that they're likely taking a different tact at it. It's not going to be, you know, a 3-month trial. He's probably going to slash a lot of witnesses. There's not going to be as many exhibits. You know, it's really going to be a different kind of presentation of the case. So, you know, if you think that if it's a 3 or 4 week trial instead of a 3-month, you know, we're at 100, 120 hours, and that leaves you, you know, maybe 200 or so to prep. And I think that, you know, we don't want, there was a lot of, you know, sort of scuttlebutt around that he's going to be paid $1 million and all of this and where the tax dollars going. And I think I actually think it's in good faith that he's not being paid a ton of money to do this. He's being paid what he's worth, and there's a cap on it, so I think it seems fair.
Reasonable.
Reasonable.
No one will question his legal credentials, but why get a famous defense attorney to prosecute your case? What benefit is there to the DA's office, and maybe what pitfalls could there be?
He was previously a district attorney in Essex County, started up near me in Lawrence, then moved to Suffolk County as an assistant district attorney. So he's been on both sides of the equation. The idea here, I think, is you bring an experienced, fresh eye in, and I think that's what the district attorney decided to do, and I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, as we know, a lot of defense attorneys were once former prosecutors, and that there's sort of a unique perspective that comes with having both prosecuted cases as well as defendant cases. To me, bringing somebody who has, you know, he's been on the defense side for quite some time now, come in to take a look at the case. You know, this is an attorney who wouldn't be taking on a case like this if he didn't think he had the evidence to prove it. And so I think it gives a little bit of credibility, more credibility, and not that the, you know, obviously there was a lot of discussion about Adam Lally's presentation, but seems like it was a little bit too close, a little bit, you know, with the accusations of conspiracy and corruption, all these kinds of things. This takes it out of that. This is an outside attorney who's looking at it from an entirely different perspective. So I think it's a good move on part of the DA's office.
And we know it's not going to be, sounds like 3 months.
I hope not.
So that's where we stand right now. It's been so wonderful to see you both again. Thank you. And we know you're going to be returning with us.
Many times.
Thanks for having us.
Coming up on Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial. What would this be without Sue O'Connell joining the conversation?
She was our eyes and ears inside the courtroom. She's going to give us a broader view of how this one case has shaken the community in Norfolk County. Stay with us.
Sue O'Connell, our courtroom insider and commentator, joining us at the table. It's been months since the trial has ended, and unless you are directly involved, most of us have sort of taken a breath and a step back rather than be immersed like we were during the trial itself. And you're laughing.
Michael's looking at me, except for me.
Have you seen her social media?
Yeah, exactly.
It's true, and but you're also hearing it still in the air, in the public, still attention after these months. I mean, summer's usually laid back, but this trial hasn't gone anywhere in terms of popularity of chit-chat.
No, I mean, I think what's been happening is you have movements on both sides, or all sides. I hate to say there's two sides because there's a lot of mishmash, and people are now creating communities and cultures that have very little to do with the death of John O'Keefe, bringing justice, or even if you think Karen Read is guilty, Karen Read. You know, if you're on social media, people are calling each other's names, they're criticizing the way they look, they're calling you stupid for not watching the entire every second of the trial. And then in Canton, you have all of these things happen that make you feel like you're in middle school. There are multiple reports to the Canton police that people have been throwing rubber ducks in front of people's houses and in front of the businesses, the D&E Pizza, to make a statement in regard of Karen Read's innocence, or having this phony currency, not real money, but just as a joke. And they're being charged with littering. They're being charged with witness intimidation, or at least being investigated for that. They might be charged. So there's just this crazy culture that has emerged that, again, has nothing to do with finding justice for John O'Keefe's death, about investigating it. If a lot of these people spent less time on social media and less time running around with these protests, and maybe writing letters to the district attorney, writing letters and calling the governor's office, calling the attorney general, voting in the election to try and change, finding someone to run against Morrissey if that's what you think should happen. Instead of this juvenile behavior, which takes up the police time, takes up the state police time, it's just chaos and crazy.
I'm sorry, I just can't believe rubber ducks entered into the conversation here.
We have seen it spill over into local government, too. The audit of the department, you saw two people yelling at each other, a woman getting escorted out. Is that just sort of par for the course for where we are now?
Well, it is. I mean, it is, as we talk about all the time on that issue in politics. This is what it is. But you have people who are taking sort of the most extreme views, showing up and making the arguments. I talk to people in Canton. I lived in Canton for 10 years. Tons of people aren't going to the meetings because they don't want to deal with that craziness. They want their police department audited. Sounds like a great idea. But can't you just get behind the idea that we should be embracing the O'Keefe family for their loss? We should be caring for those children who have been orphaned. If you think that Karen Read, I mean, there are problems with the investigation, support the Karen Read movement to try and get some investigations into the district attorney and the state police. And remember, John O'Keefe did nothing wrong, and he ended up dead.
All right, so there are several adjacent cases to Karen Read. One of them, witness intimidation charges against Aiden Carney, also known as Turtle Boy. His lawyer sent a letter to the DA last month making some allegations. Michael, I know you had a chance to review the letter. Anything stand out to you, or is this just sort of par for the course for how these things work out when I'm defending my client?
Well, it's how this works out in this case, as Sue just pointed out. No, I think a lot of it is posturing. The fact is that case ultimately is going to need to be tried. Right now, they're fighting about various discovery that they each feels that they're entitled to get, and that the government, and they have been too slow in turning over some of that information. But at the end of the day, will there be a case there that likely will go forward? I think the answer is yes. And I think the Commonwealth will take quite seriously these questions about witness intimidation.
All right, so many things to monitor as we continue to move forward.
No, and John O'Keefe, Sue, thank you so much. At the center of it, there are all these spokes that come off of it.
And justice is at the center of it.
All right, when we come back, a look at what's next for the Karen Read murder trial.
Stay with us. You're watching Canton Confidential.
Welcome back to Canton Confidential. We mentioned earlier in the show that Karen Read is still facing 3 charges for the murder of John O'Keefe. She's fighting to have 2 of those charges dismissed. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court is expected to hear arguments sometime in November.
As of right now, Read's second criminal trial is set for January 27th, and it's very hard not to pay attention to the fact that that is just 2 days before the 3rd anniversary of John O'Keefe's death.
Yeah, before we get there, though, no doubt there are probably going to be more twists and turns in this case as it approaches. But we want to remain clear about who is at the center of this story, and that is Officer John O'Keefe.
He was called JJ by his loved ones. Officer John O'Keefe was a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department. He's been described as a loving friend, brother, and uncle. When his sister and brother-in-law died just months apart, he became guardian for his young niece and nephew. And we have to remember, John O'Keefe was just 46 years old.
Right, and as you mentioned earlier, important to keep him centered at all of this.
Right, and justice for John O'Keefe, however that looks,
Right.
that the family gets
Right.
it.
All right, well, that is all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
We do hope you'll stay with NBC 10 Boston for complete coverage as this case continues to develop, which it will, and stay tuned for future editions of Canton Confidential. Until then, we hope you have a great night.